No, it's just testing the microphones. Today is May 9th, 1995. The survivor is Henry Melnick. The interviewer is Richard Bassett. We're in the city of Toronto, in Canada, and the language of the interview will be English.
The date is May the 9th, 1995. The survivor's name is Mr. Henry Melnick. I am the interviewer. My name is Richard Bassett, B-A-S-S-E-T-T. The interview is taking place in Toronto, Canada, and it will be in English. Mr. Henry Melnick, tape number 1. Mr. Melnick, could you please spell your name for me?
My name is Henry, Henry, Nry, Melnick, Melnick.
And when were you born, Mr. Melnick?
I was born in June the 25th, 1922.
Where?
I was born in Lodz, Poland.
How do you spell Lodz?
L-O-D-Z.
Could you please tell me your father's name?
My father's name was Elijah.
And what did he do?
He had a little factory, sock factory.
And how many employees did he have?
A couple.
Were they Jewish or not Jewish?
Jewish mostly, as I remember. A-R-C-Z-Y-K.
Did your father have any brothers or sisters?
My father had a couple of brothers, but I knew just one of them.
What were their names?
Just a minute, didn't come. It went so many years.
Okay, if it comes back to you, you can tell me
Okay,
later.
I will.
How about your mother's family?
My mother had a couple of sisters, 2 sisters, and 2 brothers. But the brothers, one was in Russia, and one of her brothers lived in London, England, and had his family there.
Now, did your father's brothers survive the war?
No, nobody survived of my father's family, not either, and not of my mother's family.
And what about your parents themselves?
My parents didn't survive. I will speak about them.
Did you know your grandparents?
I never knew my grandparents because it wasn't the time when they lived in the time of the epidemics, and they didn't survive. So I never met them.
Do you know their names?
I don't their names either because we never spoke about them.
Have you any idea how far back your family went in Lodz? How many generations?
Probably when the Jews came to Poland, probably 400 years ago.
So you think that your ancestors all were in Lodz? They didn't come from different cities in Poland?
Yeah,
Lodz?
they came. My mother came from a smaller town than my father, but they got married in Lodz, and I was born then, my brother and my sister.
Could you tell me about your brother and sister, please? What were their names?
My brother's name was Joseph. He was 2 years older than me. My sister's was Genia, and she was 2 years younger than me.
And did they survive the war?
My brother escaped in 1940 to the Soviet Union, where I was in contact with him until 1941, when until the Germans attacked the Soviet Union. And since then, I never heard about him. I couldn't get in touch with him anymore.
And what about Genya?
Genya died natural causes in Lodz. She died in 1933. She was 9 years old.
Can you tell me, do you remember where you lived, the actual place you
We
lived?
used to live on the Piotrkowska 35, where by the way, I was 2 years ago there. The first time after 53 years, since 1940.
Is that a house or an apartment?
It's an apartment building, and I went there with my wife, Elaine, with my daughter, Betty, and my daughter-in-law, Rivka.
Can you tell me what you remember of the house back then?
When I was now there, I remembered everything, all the neighbors, the names of the neighbors I mentioned, and I showed which apartment they used to live. I went up to our apartment at the staircase on the 3rd floor, but I didn't go inside. I just couldn't do it.
Can you describe to me what you remember the apartment being like?
It was a 2-bedroom apartment, 2 rooms, with a kitchen.
Furniture?
And furniture, everything according to the times.
And according to the times, were you a fairly well-to-do family or?
We were a middle-class family.
Can you tell me about Lodz itself, what you remember?
Lodz was a very vibrant city. It was a textile industrial city. And there were big factories in the textile factories where each one employed around 10,000, 5,000 or 6,000 people. My father had a little factory where he manufactured socks. It wasn't a big factory. And it doesn't exist now. And that place where he had that little factory was demolished everything, and was created a park in that same section. So I didn't find anything.
So what other kind of industry was there in Lodz?
Mostly textile industry.
Mostly textiles.
Yes.
Was there anything else?
I think there was everything a little bit. Stores with every kind of other manufacturing, clothing, a big vibrant place.
Do you happen to know the population of Lodz?
The population of Lodz was approximately 750,000 before the war. There was some over 200,000 Jews in that city.
So almost a third of the population.
Each third one was Jewish.
Was there a predominantly Jewish area in Lodz?
Yeah, there was a section, they call it the Baluti, where it was later the ghetto in that place. We used to live in the center of the city. But it was also a large Jewish population. In our apartment, where everybody was Jewish.
The Baluti, does that mean something?
No, the ghetto was created there, and a part of that.
But is that a name or a word?
It's a name of the section.
I see.
It was a section of the city.
Were there any Gentiles living in the Jewish area?
Some, but not too many. Not too many.
Can you tell me about where you went to school?
I went to school, first to public school. It was a couple of blocks around our building. By the way, I visited that school while being there 2 years ago. And later I attended 2 years of technical high school, electrical school.
Electrical.
Yeah. And then it was interrupted, my education, because of the war.
What kind of things did you study in the regular school?
In regular school, we studied all the subjects, like regular public school, except we had a religion lesson where we learned a little bit Hebrew. And the rest was the same like a regular public school, Polish and mathematics, history. We learned a little bit about the Jewish history on the religious lessons. We had a religious teacher.
And this school was attended mostly or only by Jewish people or by non-Jews?
The school was just Jewish people. We didn't go on Saturdays to school. Instead, we attended on Sundays.
So the teachers that were teaching you, were they Jewish?
Mostly, except one. The gymnastics teacher was non-Jewish.
And how did he relate to the Jewish kids?
Exactly, pardon? Exactly that teacher, I didn't see any difference than other ones. Maybe because he was like the only one.
Okay. Did you ever have, can you tell me about your friends? Were there any non-Jewish friends?
I really didn't have non-Jewish friends because all of the neighbors and my friends in the school were all Jewish. So I didn't.
Did you ever experience any forms of anti-Semitism as a child? I mean, well before the war.
Yes, sure, I experienced. I remember when we went to a soccer match, and a Jewish team played with a non-Jewish, a Polish team. If we won, they threw rocks at us, and if we lost, they threw rocks also.
Anything else that you remember?
I remember once going to a hockey match. Was also a Jewish group, Bar Kochba, they called it, sport club. And I went with my cousin, was a hockey player. And at the end, the police had to escort us to the streetcars.
Can you tell me about the relationship generally between the Jews and the non-Jews in the city?
There were the relation in business. I know my father had non-Jewish customers, and they were anti-Semitic. That's true.
How do you know that?
Because they were every time talking. One of them said, "Wait, Hitler will come," or etc., etc. Or anti-Semitic remarks. There were parties, anti-Semitic parties, National Socialists, they call it the ND party, National Democrats. And I remember the 3rd of May was the day of the Polish Constitution of the 3rd of May, and there was a demonstration of these nationals, of the anti-Semites. And I remember standing in front of our apartment building in a street, and there with slogans, "Down with Jews," etc., etc.
When was this?
This was all, even until the last year before the war, even 1939, in May of 1939.
Can you tell me about Jewish life in the city, organizations, newspapers?
The Jewish life in the city was very vibrant. There were organizations of all kinds, from the socialist organization, Bund. There was all the Zionist organizations, including Beitar and the Revisionist Party. Shomer HaTzair, Gordonia, the Greenbaum Czechs, they called them, and all other ones. And it went on until the war started.
Did you belong to any of these organizations?
I didn't, no.
Did your father or mother belong to any of these
No,
organizations?
they didn't belong.
And what about shuls? Were there a lot of synagogues?
There were quite a few synagogues in Lodz, big ones. There was a couple of three of very big ones. There was the Wilke synagogue, they called it. There was the Deutsche synagogue, how they called it, and the Outstädtische synagogue. Now I remember seeing them burning. One was taken apart and two were set fire where they burned down to the ground.
When was this?
It was in 1939 after the Germans marched into Lodz.
What about a Jewish library?
They were Jewish libraries, but I don't remember where exactly.
And
There were Jewish theaters. I remember my parents going to the Jewish theaters. I remember Jigan and Schumacher, who were bought from Lodz. My parents attended their shows. I saw them after the war in Israel and in Toronto.
And what about the newspapers?
There were quite a few newspapers. Or maybe they were from Warsaw brought in, but lots of them in Lodz also.
Can you tell me what language did you speak at home?
I spoke with my parents Yiddish, mostly with my father, and I spoke Polish outside in a school and with my mother.
Why don't you speak Yiddish with her?
Because we were mostly speaking Polish and used to it. My father didn't speak that well Polish, so we are speaking with him Yiddish. And we spoke with some friends Yiddish on a courtyard playing.
But your mother knew
My mother
Yiddish.
spoke, oh sure, she knew Yiddish and how.
What were you like at home as far as religion was concerned?
We were, like here now, conservative. We attended all the holidays, the synagogue, not every Saturday, but mostly all the holidays. We celebrate all the holidays. We Passover and all our other holidays. We didn't attend school in these holidays.
But your father's factory was closed on
Closed,
Shabbos anyway.
everything, all the business, all the Jewish business were closed on Saturday.
Was that normal? Were there a lot of Jews there who were conservative as opposed to Orthodox in Lodz?
There was maybe 50% not Orthodox, approximately, if I am right.
What about the economic conditions of the Jewish people, especially?
There was every kind of classes. They were very poor people. They were textile workers, mostly in that section of Jewish section in Baluti, where they had a weaving machine at home and operating it by hand. And they were weaving in the same room where they used to sleep and live, were very poor people. And there was middle class the most, and not the most, but middle class, and some other rich people who had big factories with thousands of people working for them.
I guess the same thing could be said of the Gentiles.
Yes, yeah. Mostly the big factories were Jewish or German. They were Germans, nationals, who had big factories.
Did you ever, as a child, leave Lodz and travel to any other parts?
Mostly not. I didn't travel. The condition different than now, and there was the only thing was a train. And I remember we traveled out of the city to some place, but not to visit any other city.
So generally, what would you say, as far as you remember your childhood being like? What was life like overall for you?
I remember a family life with large family of aunts and cousins and uncles, and visiting them from time to time. We didn't have to phone because there were no phones. We just walked over, or we went by streetcar, and we said hi.
You got
We are
together-
here.
You got together a lot?
Right, yes.
And in terms of the quality of your life, do you remember it being a pretty good life in Lodz?
We had enough, I mean, we weren't hungry. But it was a struggle
To do business?
I remember my father struggled, sure. The help of my mother and me, whatever I could.
And culturally?
Culturally,
Educationally?
I said I went to public school, finished the public school, and later I started high school.
So do you look back at those times fondly or not really? Before the war, obviously, before everything, all this stuff happened.
It's not to compare with now, but it was not so bad. I don't know, I mean for me. I was dressed, I had a suit, I had the shoes, and there were some people who didn't have it either.
Can you tell me, when did this begin to change?
To good or to...
The bad, the life that you remembered?
I remember there was a time of the recession or depression in the 30s, in the 1930s, where I remember it was a struggle to get some coal to heat the apartment, and some potatoes even. It was a harsh winter in 1929. I remember as a child, as a boy.
And what happened out of that? Were Jews blamed? Were Jews attacked because of that?
Jews were always attacked, every time. Or they demolished some tombstones on a cemetery. Or
Even in the 20s?
Even in the 20s. It goes back and back a long time.
So when did this begin to change in the 30s? After the Depression, as the war started to draw closer, what do you remember happening in Lodz, let's say in 1935, 1937?
The real anti-Semitism started after 1935. There was a Polish Marshal Pilsudski who was keeping it under control a little bit. And after he passed away, the situation changed, went out of control. There were in the parliament some members of parliament, anti-Semites. I remember they tried to stop the kosher or the ritual killing, I mean slaughtering, and they make some quotas where they didn't let slaughter the ritual way.
Remember anything else?
Not what I can remember.
Do you remember Jewish businesses? Were they boycotted?
Oh yeah, I remember they came out, don't buy from Jews, and they were, when they had a demonstration, the National Socialists, they had placards with written it, don't buy, and every kind of slogans.
Don't buy.
From Jews.
And where did they go with these placards?
They went on the main street. They were walking.
What was the name of that street, do you remember?
Yeah, the Piotrkowska Street, where we used to live.
And this was in 1937, 1935?
Up to 1939.
And what happened to the Jewish businesses? Did they in fact get boycotted?
They were, but it wasn't probably, yes, I cannot remember because I was 17 years old, and but I think it affected a little bit the business.
Do you remember your father's business being affected?
Yes, yes, yeah.
So what happened after that? How did that develop?
I don't understand what means.
What I mean is after 1939.
Or after 39,
you
when
had the
when they
placards and the boycotts. Were there new laws? Were there new laws brought out against the Jews up until 1939 by the Polish government?
No, there weren't. We had the same rights, but just maybe officially we had the same rights. They were Jewish. Jews went to the Polish army. So we had the same rights, but not official. I mean, not just officially.
So unofficially, what was going
We
on?
unofficially anti-Semitism, and boycotts, etc.
How were the police toward the Jewish people?
The police was anti-Semitic also. But in comparison, what I went through, I see it was nothing.
When you say the
For
police
me.
were anti-Semitic, in what way? How did that show itself? Would they not respond if they were called, or would they beat Jews? Do you remember anything like that?
No.
Okay. So, what happened after 1939 in Lodz?
Now, in 1939, in September of 1939, when the Germans marched into Lodz, and everything went upside down. The Germans used to catch Jews in the street, grab them, and take them to every kind of work. And one time I remember I was caught, but they caught a few hundred people who were lined up in the street, and when I was wearing still my school cap, and I looked younger than I was, and one of the German, I don't remember if it was the army or was it another unit, looked at me while we were standing, came to me and said, "Disappear." And I disappeared. And I went home, ran home. I don't know what happened with the other people. I don't know where they took them. Sure, we had to wear the Star of David in the front and one on your back, so they could recognize who. And there were announcements: whoever wants to do it will be caught, will be shot.
Wearing the stars in the front and the back?
Yes. We had to wear these stars so they could recognize us.
Was that in 1939?
1939, just maybe a couple of weeks later, when the Germans came into Lodz. I remember going to buy bread, to line up for bread at a bakery where there was police watching, and some Polish police, and they came and pulled out all the Jews from the lineup when I was already close to the window where I could buy the bread. They pulled us out, and I came home without the bread. And it used to catch people in the streets, what I said already before. They took them to every kind of work. My brother couldn't stand it already. In late 1939, he made up his mind to run away to the Soviet Union. Poland was at that time divided in two. One side was was a demarcations line where one side, the west side of Poland, was occupied by Germany and the east side by the Soviet Union. I remember he smuggled, they were smuggling going over the border, and I remained with my parents at home. I was the youngest and the younger, and I remained with my parents. In end of 1939, the Germans created a ghetto in Lodz, in the northern part of the city, the Balute, where all the Jews supposed to be ascertained in February of 1940 there, from the whole city, because Jews used to live all around the city. We didn't rush to the ghetto, but I remember taking some belongings over to the ghetto and keeping that friends or some relatives. In time when we will have to go there, we will have something of our belongings. In February, beginning of February 1940, in February, in the night, we heard some footsteps on a staircase, and that was the German police came in and gave us 10 minutes time to grab some belongings and took us away. Took us to the police station. From there they took us to a concentration place where they concentrate some people. And when there was 1,000 people, first they searched us for valuables, took everything away what we had valuable, money, gold or whatever, and they marched us after a day to the railroad station, where they put us in a train and sent us out of there. Lodz was annexed to Germany right away, because there was a big national German population in that city. They sent us to southern Poland, me and my parents, among these people, and they sent us to a town in southern Poland, not far from the Czechoslovakian border. The name was Nowy Sącz.
How do you spell that? Nowysacz. And there was a Jewish population of some 15,000 Jews in that town. The whole town was some 35,000 people. So approximately half of it was Jewish. And we became a part of that Jewish community during the war. Right away I had to go to work, and my father also. It was slave labor. There was the forced labor where we had to go. What did you do?
Any kind of work, manual labor.
Such as?
They sent us to the hills of there were mountains around the town, to regulate rivers. I think they just want to keep us occupied. And second, in the beginning, in 1940, they paid us. So it helped a little bit, not much, or we could buy something, some food. In the same year, at the end of 1940, I was sent to a place at a railroad station where they were storage for the army, German army. And first I used to unload coal there. Some 3 cars a day. It was very hard to do for one person, but I did it. And when there was windy or a little rainy, my face was black, and we didn't have showers like here to wash up. So it was a problem, it was very hard. But later I became a steady there in that place to work. And I had a little better condition. And that man, the responsible, we called him the Lagermeister, he was very good to us.
Remember his name?
Joseph Grimme. He was a national German from Czechoslovakia. And he was very good to us. He was a veteran of the First World War. And he was handicapped. A little of his arm, his ear was missing a few fingers. And he was very good to us. He used to cook for us lunch, that was a storage for the army where we always could organize some food to take, where I could organize to take from my parents' home. And that was a big help. Every time lunchtime, he used to come in and talk with us. One time, something happened in a ghetto, or in a Jewish section, really was no ghetto yet. He didn't let us go back to home. He made up a place, a room for us, where we used to sleep, and he supplied some food for us. One day when we went out to work, it was in 1941, in summer 41, we had to pass the Gestapo officers, and we had passes to go out from the Jewish section, where at the Gestapo officers, they checked our passes, our names, they had a list, and whoever was on that list, they just kept him behind. They didn't let him go already. Later they went in to the Jewish section and rounded up people who were on that list. That list, where I heard about it after the war, it was a list of some Jewish organization, a Jewish socialist organization. And whoever was on that list, they took these people, marched them to the Jewish cemetery, where they were already digged graves, and they killed all of them. There were some 400 people. The same evening, they probably didn't have enough. They came into the building where I used to live with my parents. We used to live on a last floor. It looked like an entrance to an attic, and there was no light on the last floor. I heard the noises and shootings. I stood beside the window, dark in a room, with my parents, and I could see them kicking indoors. There were catwalks around the courtyard, where they were running around on these catwalks, breaking windows and shooting whoever they approached. Now they shoot everybody, whoever they just met. Elderly people, growing up, or children, didn't make any difference. After it got quiet, after 15, 20 minutes, a woman came up running to us. I saw everything through the window, what they did. And she came up, and she had shot through her throat. Was here one hole, and the other side another one, where was bleeding. I was shaking, but my father was very calm took a towel and wrapped around her neck. She was a woman who came with our transport from Lodz. She used to live a floor lower, one floor below us. She had 3 children, a girl 12, a boy 5, and a boy 4. The girl was dead right away. The 2 boys had bullets in their heads. One survived 4 weeks, the other one survived 5 weeks. And she was okay. This was in 1941 in summer. Then they created a ghetto where there really was 2 parts in the city, 2 ghettos.
This is still Novo Sącz.
Novo Sącz, yeah. Where in the one ghetto were the people who were working, and the other ghetto where the people didn't work. Mostly elderly people. Because I don't think in such a little town there was work enough for everybody. One time, it was already, I used to work until summer, was in summer of 1941, when then the Germans attacked the Soviet Union, and after a few months the Germans went very fast east, and they sent these, the whole storage for the army went east, and I lost my good job. Now I had to look for another job, and I was sent from the manpower. There was a Jewish officer, manpower, and they sent me to the German Air Force, where we were a few boys, 5 boys working, and that was a pilot school, and we did every kind of work. From cleaning to painting, gardening, building, whatever we were asked. In summer of 1942, there were announcements of on buildings in a ghetto on the walls that from some strategic reasons Jews cannot be anymore here, and they will be transported to the east where they will work there. At the same time came to me a high-ranking at work, approached me a high-ranking German officer who I never knew. I never saw him before. Probably he was the responsible for us, and asked me my name, and he told me that he heard about there is a resettling, and he would like us to work for him, to continue to work for him, and he will come there when we will be assembled for resettling, and he will ask for us. I gave him my name, and my friends gave him the names, and I told it to my parents when I came home to the ghetto from work. They were skeptic, but my mother said, if he will come and ask you to stay behind, you stay. I said, no, wherever you will go, I will go. We were already once resettled before from Lodz to that town, so we will be resettled again. What can they do to me? Just ask me to work. And I wasn't afraid for work. Came the day, and we were all assembled on one place, on the bank of the river was Dunajec, and there were two bridges, a road bridge and a railroad bridge. In between we were assembled. It was down the hill from the town was on a hill where they could control us. And I stood there with my parents, and I said, I'm going with you wherever you go. And I saw that high-ranking German officer. It took him a few times to approach the SS, the Gestapo. The commandant of the Gestapo was his name, ironically. Heyman, written H-A-M-A-N, what means Haman.
And this high-ranking officer, you don't remember his name?
I couldn't ask that high-ranking officer. It was not appropriate for a Jew to ask his name. You know what could happen. Could accuse me of espionage or something like this. Anyway, I saw him a few times until he approached, they called him, and he gave that little piece of paper to Heyman, and Heyman called my name. I didn't answer. My mother didn't give up. She gave me a push that I flew out 10 feet from the lineup. And then they saw me, they say, come here. I went on the side, and the same my few friends. They picked the other 200 people and marched us away, brought us back to the ghetto, where they surrounded a couple of houses. We were 200 people there. Now, if not the German high-ranking officer, who I never knew his name and I won't know anymore, and I don't know why he did it, I wouldn't be sitting here today. Because the rest of all these people, there were 16,000 people assembled there, from the town and from surrounding villages or towns. All of them were marched away. I didn't know then where, but after the war, they sent them to Belzec, what is now on the Polish-Ukrainian border. They were all murdered there. Nobody knows exactly how they did it, because there were no survivors from Belzec.
Including your parents?
Including my parents, who I never saw them again. Now, we went back to work to the Air Force, but not for a long time. The Gestapo didn't let us anymore. They kept us behind with the other 200 people, and we had to clean out both ghettos.
When is this now?
This is now in August, end of August 1942.
If I may just ask you a question, when you had to leave Lodz, you were given 10 minutes
Yes.
to grab everything you could.
Yeah.
What did you take?
Took a few shirts, whatever I had, underwear, a little bag with something. That's what I took. A lot, whatever I could put in a bag.
And your parents?
The same thing, or a little suitcase.
Do you remember what you were thinking at the time? Did you think that she would come back home? Did you think you'd ever see her home again?
Who's home?
Your apartment. Did you ever think you would be back there?
No, I never thought, and I didn't want to go back to Lodz. But it came up the 50th anniversary of Ghetto Warsaw, where my wife, Hela, survived it. And my daughter, Betty, and my daughter-in-law, Rivka, they wanted to go there. They would like to see. My daughter wanted to see. She asked me everything about her mother, where she went through and how she survived. She wanted to see all the streets. There are the streets, but there are no more. The building not the same. It's changed everything.
No, what I meant, Mr. Melnick, was back at that time. Do you remember thinking that you would ever be back?
No, I
Did
never.
you understand?
Oh yeah,
what was
I
going
always
on
were
there?
dreaming of going back, but I looked at it different. It wasn't the same anymore when I came back. They
At the moment that you were leaving, as a
I
17,
never
18-year-old
thought
boy,
it will take a lifetime not to come back there. I thought we never knew. We were always hoping maybe the war will end very fast.
and when you all went to Novi Sad,
Yeah.
what did the population, how many Jews wound up going there? You were telling me that there were 15,000 people there, Jewish people
Yes, there were
there. It must have, the Jewish population must have swollen if you had a whole lot of Jews coming from all over the place.
not many, no. No, there came a few thousand people. That was all. Now on
So in 1942.
1942, they didn't let us go anymore to work to the Air Force. We worked at cleaning out the ghettos. Sure, we didn't give up. When we found some valuables, we didn't give it to the Germans. The Germans were standing in front of the building where we had everything to bring down. We went to the backyard where we used to change for some food. There were come poles to the fences where they... Sure, it was we endangered our lives, I knew. But we were hungry and we had to do it.
So what did you do?
We gave them away some sheets, beddings, whatever we could. But there was lots of it because the people who were sent away, they couldn't take everything. Everybody had a little bag. That was all, and the rest they left behind. Now we had to clean out everything, all the apartments. It was very hard work. The furniture wasn't like today, some chipboard or plywood. It was everything solid and oak and wood and very heavy. And we worked like that for a few months. It was from August, end of August, till beginning of November, when we finished to clean out the ghettos. They surrounded us one evening, police, marched us to the city jail. Again they searched us. We had to give back everything. I had some money, Polish money. It was the general government. It belonged to Krakow. Frank was the governor. And there was Polish money, I mean guaranteed by Germany. I had some money what I didn't give up. I said, if I have to survive right now, it can be helpful. And if I have to die, it doesn't make any difference if I have it or I don't. Next morning, they took us out in the city, in a courtyard, in a jail. And we knew if we go to the left, all the Gestapo was there, the whole city Gestapo, with police, with little machine guns on their shoulders, with the green leather coats, all of them. And we knew if we go to the left, it's to the cemetery, where they killed so many people before. It was quiet, we didn't speak. We were lined up in rows of 5. And they marched us out. The first snow was November, start to come down. Marched us out to the right, so we had a little hope. And they put us on a train and told us they are bringing us to another ghetto. That ghetto was Ghetto Tarnów. And they brought us there and gave us over to the Jewish community leaders of that ghetto. In that ghetto, Tarnów had a population of some over 40,000 Jews before the war, but there was just 4,000 Jews when they brought us there. A couple of weeks ago, before they brought us, they sent out other people to the, also to Belgrade, they were sent out from there. Now we became a part of the Jewish community of the few thousand people in Ghetto Tarnów.
This is in April of 43?
This was in November of 1942. Now, there were two ghettos there, divided by a fence. They put me in a ghetto where the people didn't work with my friends, when we arrived there. I had that little money what I didn't give up to them. My friend was a baker and he bought some flour on a black market, and he baked some croissants where I took them, went over the fence from the one ghetto to the other, to the ghetto where the people were working and selling these croissants in the evening after they came back from work. I did it a few times like this, we did and it helped us so we could buy a piece of bread. Because we didn't get to eat there, except a little bit soup in the kitchen once a day. And we had to organize some food. After the money ran out, we had to find other sources. We used to live in a basement with some other boys. And we used to walk around in a ghetto. It was after they sent people out, and we were looking up on catwalks wherever there was hanging a bedding, pillows. One of us went up there and gave a little push, and two of us grabbed it. We didn't steal it. It was our people's who were taking away to their death. We grabbed these beddings. In our basement we had an extra empty room where we cut material, we used to fold it up, and I went out from the ghetto to change it for food.
Mr. Melnick, you're now in the, telling me about the ghetto Tarnów. Tell me what it was like living in Tarnów, and how was it protected? How was it guarded, I should say?
Ghetto Tarnów was fenced around like all other ghettos. We used to live on the edge of the ghetto. That's one side of the street was the ghetto, and the other side was the outside of the ghetto. I pushed away a board of the fence. I had already my place where I knew how to do and where to go. Pushed away that board of the fence, and I looked. When the guard took a corner, then I ran out, ran across the street, ran to a Christian Polish family where I used to change that beddings for some food, whatever I could do, because we didn't have any other way to live through. That little soup was not enough. And I know I endangered my life, but when you are hungry, you will do anything. I brought back food where me and my friends shared it, and we did it quite a few times, until the condition in the ghetto were very bad. there was no facilities to wash up. We had lice, we had bed bugs, there were rats running around.
What happened if somebody got sick?
There was a Jewish hospital, but I don't think there was too much help. They couldn't help too much, probably. And it went on like this until 1943. In April of 1943, there were rumors that that they need some young men for a new camp, to open a camp. And nobody wanted to go in a camp where he wouldn't have any more control over his life. In a ghetto you had anyway had a little control, where you could go and walk and do whatever you want. And I decided with my friend, Moshe Laser Bergman, was my best friend. We made up we will hide. And we were hiding in a courtyard in a shed, a wooden shed. And we were sitting there the whole night. In the morning, it was the beginning of April, it was still cold, and we were frozen. There was no heating in the basement, but it was warmer than outside. And in the morning, when came daylight, we said we are going back into the basement. Because it was quiet, nobody showed up. We went down to the basement. A few minutes later, the police was there, grabbed us, marched us to the police station, kept us in the basement there until they had a few hundred people, 100 people we were. Came a few trucks, SS, put us on these trucks and drove us away from there. It was east of Tarnów, northeast between Jasło and Krosno. There are two towns. The name was Szebnie, was a camp.
How do you spell that?
S-H-E-B-N-I-E. Szebnie. This was a Russian prisoner camp before, war prisoners. But it was empty. There were already 200 people there in that camp. They were from Płaszów, brought from Kraków, and we were 100 people. They brought us to a roll call square. First they searched us. First I got over my head with a stick because I didn't take my hat off in front of that assessment. They brought us, they put us in, we stood in rows. Came the commandant out. His name was Scheid. We called him the Shed, what means in Hebrew a devil. And he was a devil. They took one of our people out, the people from Płaszów. The man was a carpenter and he did something what they didn't like, some work, carpenter work. And they beat him up. There was such a stool where he has to lie over it, and one of the assessmen with his, how you call it? Club was hitting him, and he was screaming very much. So the commandant said, shoot him. Took out his gun, shot him in his head. He fell down. We stood all around watching. This was the welcome for us. He had a boy, that man, 15-year-old boy, who was standing in a line-up with us, watching it. It was a shock for us. It was a very hard camp, that Szebnie. First, some people went out to the refinery to work in Gorlice. Gorlice was there were whales, oil wells, and they had a refinery. The rest of us, we worked in a camp. What was our work? I was assigned to the laundry. Clothing came back from all the ghettos, the remaining clothing, and from camps. We had to wash it. There was a mechanical laundry there in one of the barracks.
You were going to tell me about the showers.
I will, yeah, we'll come to it. One Sunday, on Sundays we didn't, afternoon we had off. We had our Jewish commandant. His name was Krakauer. He was from Krakow also. His name was Krakauer. And came in Scheid, the commandant, and saw us walking around. So he called our commandant, Krakauer, and he asked him why we don't work. So he told him Sunday afternoon we have off. So whoever wants to go to have a haircut, there was a barber, one of the prisoners. He's getting a haircut, and we will have shower. We can go to shower on Sunday afternoon. There was a shower the size like a room, a big room, concrete floor in a barrack. First, he saw passing by a boy. He called him, "Come here, you don't want a shower. Turn around." Took his gun and shot him. The boy fell down. I remember his face. He had red hair, the boy had a sister with him there. Then he said to our commandant, to shower the camp, I can shower it in half an hour. Bring 50 boys to the shower, and 50 girls. And then undress everybody. This never happened in any other camp. I couldn't hear about it. We went into the showers naked. We threw our clothing on the ground. You understand, that wasn't fun. The girls turned around one side. The boys turned the other side. After they let down a little cold water, we were running out, half naked, and we couldn't find even stepping on the clothing of others. And they were standing around, the whole administration, maybe 15 of them, SS and police, and laughing. It was a shock to us. And they did it on and on until they finished the whole camp, a few hundred people. After a few months, they started to bring in more people. The remaining people from the ghettos around. That was a camp to liquidate the last people, to concentrate the last Jewish people from southern Poland. They came people from Tarnów ghetto, the last ones. Part of it they sent straight to Auschwitz. And we became a camp of a few thousand people. One day, standing in the door of the barrack, I saw was a Lagerführer. They called him Grzymek. He was, they said, a national German SS. With his rank was Hauptscharführer, what is like a staff sergeant, something like this. He came in, he had a guard around him, 4 Jewish policemen. And I noticed on his shoulder he had a little machine gun. That machine gun was a Kalashnikov. What I didn't know then, I know now. And he wanted to try it out. Across the door on Appellplatz, they were digging, some Jewish people were digging in the ground. I don't know what they did. One day they digged, the next time they put it back, the soil. He didn't like one guy was using the shovel. He called him and told him to bend down and dropped his, from his arm, from his shoulder, that little machine gun on his arm and told him to bend over. That man didn't bend over. So he grabbed his head. So he pushed away, he jumped back, and he got a little bit scared. He told the two policemen, the Jewish policemen, to grab that man. Then he gave an order to put a post in the center of the roll call square and told them to hang him by his arms from behind. This was in the morning, maybe 9 or 10 o'clock. We didn't have watches. I know it was a few hours after we started to work. And that poor man was hanging the whole day until the evening. The evening, and he was screaming, "Kill me, kill me." He couldn't already. He pulled his arms out. Now, who could go? I thought I could kill that man. I had a knife hidden in a bag. I could go and stab that man. But what would I achieve, I was thinking. They could take after that, killing me and him, kill other 100 people or more as a punishment for it. That's what they used to do. In the evening, they came in with a few jeeps. Not jeeps, really German, Feldcar they called it. They came in, maybe 10 of them, SS. And that Hauptscharführer Schimek with the same little machine gun, that Kalishnikov. And another of the SS stood up on that vehicle, high. We stood all around. We were a few thousand people. And he said like this: "That man had your lives endangered today. That man attacked den Herrn Hauptscharführer Schimek when he came into the camp." He attacked him. No more, just he attacked him. And on the order of den Kommandanten, nobody will be hurt today. We could kill today 50 men and 50 women. We could kill all of you, but on the order from den Kommandanten, nobody will be hurt except him. And they gave an order to take him down. They put him with face down, and that little machine gun went off, pumped in a few bullets in his brain, where the blood started to splash out from the brain. We stood around. Then our boys with a little buggy, who were always doing that job, took away the dead ones, took away that man outside of the camp, where they went with a guard, a Ukrainian guard. There were Ukrainian SS watching us around on the towers. There was a fence around, high fence. And that was the end of it, this day. On other occasion, they took, on a roll call on Appellplatz, they brought in 10 people, told them to lie down, face down. And one of them went over with a little machine gun, and the rest of them were finishing up whoever was still moving with the handguns. And we had to watch it. Now start again another part, selections. They, on a roll call, when we were assembled, they went through and select people. I noticed mostly women and children. If there was a few children, still not too many. Every time selections, every time a few hundred people, they marched them out from the camp into a ravine where they had to undress, and they killed these people, murdered them. Mostly was doing the Ukrainian guards were doing shooting, and they did it a few times. I met a man after the war who survived it. He was there. That's what I heard from him, how they did it. He was naked, but the bullet just scratched his head. He fell down on other dead ones. And when it got dark, he went up, grabbed some clothing. The Ukrainian guards were moving away a little bit. They went away. They were drunk. He ran up a hill and was sitting there a few days on that hill. Now he couldn't make up his, he couldn't run nowhere. He didn't know where to go. He was afraid he will get caught and by some Poles, and they will give him over to the police. Anyway, he went to the place where they brought in the dead ones from the camp, and you could bribe the Ukrainian guards. They bribed him with something, and he came back in that same buggy where they take the deads out. They brought him back in a camp. He went through the whole war, but I met him after the war, and he told me the story. Now they took out other people, 10 people from the camp with a truck with wood, brought outside there, and we could hear all the shootings. We could see later the burning, they burned the bodies. We could see the smoke. After they finished to burning these bodies, they shot these 10 people. Took other 3 people from the camp, took them out to burn the 10 bodies, and brought back 3 bodies, the Germans, the SS. Where our funeral people with that little buggy took the body out. They didn't want to have any witness. But there are witnesses. In November 1943, the same year, October 1943, was cool already, in the morning, and we heard rumors that the Einsatzgruppen of the SS arrived. Einsatzgruppen was a special SS groups who were, their job was to kill Jews, to liquidate Jews in some way, or to shoot them, or to transport them to camps, to death camps. Our Hauptscharführer, Grimek, stood up on a stool and talking. We were surrounded by the SS, the special what arrived on the rooftops of the barracks, standing with machine guns. And they watching us. We are all standing in the center. We were then already no more than 3,000 and some 3,300 people. 3,300 people. He stood up and said like this, "Who said we are going to kill you? This is not true. We are going to take you in another camp where everyone will have a bed. Here you have nothing. You are sleeping on wood shavings." I didn't believe a word what he says. "We are transporting you to a camp, Heidelager, they called it. That didn't exist, such a name, whatever. And I am going with you. And behave yourself nice, because I am going with you. My suitcases are ready, and I am coming with you." And we stood around until the evening. They took out some people. They wanted to leave 100 people there. Somehow they end up with 500. Because, you know, the police, his brother, his father, his mother, how. And I could really stay there behind to be among these 500 people. Because I was from the first one in the camp, and I had so much connection that I could remain there. But I said, no, this time I made up my mind, I am not pushing myself. Wherever they will take me, I am going. And it was a good decision. Now, in the evening, they put up trucks on the road with the headlights on, made a corridor for us to the railroad station a few kilometers away, where they marched us in groups of 50. They made a corridor every, I don't know how many meters distance, was an assessment with a gun standing, pointing at us. They marched us, we were walking quiet, calm. But when we arrived at the railroad station at the ramp, we saw what's going on. They start to beat us with their bats, pushing us, screaming at us. Undress. We had to put our clothing separately, coats separately, shoes separately. And it was a shock to us. I was from the last few groups, and they were already, I noticed as they were drunk, all of them. They pushed us, I remained in my pants and my shirt. They called it the naked transport. We were 2,800 people. I went, they pushed us in the cars, pushed the doors, closed, and when it was ready, the train started to roll. The sound of the trucks, you know, truck, 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 for a few days. I don't remember exactly, but probably 4 days. Now, where do we go? We didn't know. I was standing beside a little window there where it was so hot, we were so many people, you didn't have room even to sit. Standing beside that little window with Moshe Laser Bergman beside me. He was from Starsonj. He was 1 year younger than me. And talking to him, all of a sudden I was on a ramp where the train stopped, and I was talking to him. All of a sudden I could hear quiet and a boom. I didn't know what happened. I stopped to see, I stopped to hear, I just fell down on the floor. But when I came, I didn't know what happened. When I thought maybe they're going to gas us in a train, because I heard rumors before that they are gassing people, killing in cars, in train cars, in the boxes, and some other rumors. I didn't know what happened. But when I awaked, I touched my head, and I noticed I'm still alive, and I stood up, and I saw everybody in a car. I touched my head, and when I touched my head, I had here burnt hair. He just simply shot and it missed me with a quarter of an inch. Train started to roll again west, and some people who were from that section of Poland knew, they said, it's probably Auschwitz. After a day later, we arrived at Auschwitz. Auschwitz, at that famous ramp where they took us out from, we had to jump out from the train. And they were prisoners of Auschwitz who were setting us up in rows of 5. And the fingers of the SS were working left or right. It means who has to live and who has to die.
Selection.
The selection. When it came to my turn, I could hear in front of me some of them people, he didn't ask nothing, just told them on the side where they took them on trucks. And some of them he asked, and I could hear, if somebody said is a carpenter, they told him go this way. Whoever said is a bookkeeper, they called him women, they took to the other side. When came my turn, I didn't wait until he asked me. I jumped straight like a soldier. I knew they like it. I looked straight in his eyes and I told him, Elektromechaniker, 21 Jahre alt, 21. He told me, go to this side. Okay, I went. My friend beside me, Moshe Laser Bergman, they took him to the other side where I never saw him again. I asked why they took him, because he was wearing glasses. And they didn't want the people with glasses. If we would know, he would put his glasses in a pocket. And later nobody would ask him. I don't know if he would survive, but he would have a chance to survive, like me. They chose 700 people, you were. The rest of the 2,100 people went on the trucks and straight to the gas chambers. Never saw any body of them. Us 700, they marched to the camp without shoes, barefoot, some of them naked. Marched us to a camp. This was in Auschwitz on a ramp. They marched us to Birkenau, Auschwitz #2, where they put us in a barrack, standing. We didn't know what it is. I heard about Auschwitz. That's a camp where it's hard to survive. But I didn't know that Auschwitz is a slaughterhouse.
Number 4, May 9, 1995. Mr. Melnick, could you please tell me about Auschwitz? What are the barracks? What were they like? What do they look like? What did the camp look like? What were the living conditions?
We arrived in that was Auschwitz #2, Birkenau. And marching, we saw the high electrocuted fences with the towers, with lit lights over the fences. We arrived there in a barrack they put us, where there was no room to sit down, we were standing. And there was one of the block Älteste, I mean the leader of that block. His name was Pinkus, he was a criminal, what was put into Auschwitz by the Germans from a jail from before the war. And when somebody asked him, can I go to a washroom? He was laughing. He said, what did you come to, a sanatorium? This is not a sanatorium here. Or somebody asked for a little bit water. He said, here you don't live too long. Can you see the chimneys here going? He said, my parents went through these chimneys. He was a criminal with a green triangle. Now, after a while, they took us out of that block. We had to run through to another one where we had to undress, throw all the your clothing, where we were cut off our hair. And we were we had made they made us tattoo on our arms. My tattoo number was 160,993. And this was my name in Auschwitz. Since then, I became just a prisoner number, no more name. A few days later, we didn't get any food, too much food, just a little piece of bread and a little bit soap. And I was there for 6 weeks. In the shadows of the chimneys of the crematorias, I could see the smoke coming out during the day and fire coming out in the night. I didn't know that Auschwitz is a factory of death. Now everybody would like to get away from this place, and they select people. The whole time I couldn't go have a shower the 6 weeks there, because if you go in a shower there, you don't have where to put your clothing. And if you lose your clothing or your shoes or something, you won't get any other one and you are dead. After 6 weeks, they put us, we had to undress and come forwards in a barrack where they were standing high-ranking SS people. And we came in rows of 5. 5 and 5, again and again. And they were looking at us and said, turn. And the row turned. They looked on us from behind and marked with a finger which the guy they don't want, whoever they don't want. So I thought, if I have a number, maybe they will need me, and I am now a number, registered number. But it wasn't like this. You could have a number and go to the gas chamber. Now they came somebody and asked us on a caliber, if I understand on a caliber, to read a caliber. And I knew, because I went to school, I learned it. Whoever didn't know, they didn't take him. And everybody, now at the selection, whoever had a scratch, whoever had a rash, whoever had a hernia, they didn't take them. All these people, after they took us away from there, selected people, 200 people. The other ones, I don't know what happened, they sent to other camps, but I know the remains they took to the gas chamber. After, we used to sleep there in the barracks like stables, it looked, with banks. There was no straw, nothing, just on a wood we were lying. We got the pyjama uniforms, and then our 200 people, they took us on a truck and transport us to Auschwitz #1, and they showered us, changed our clothing, again on the trucks. Auschwitz #1 is a camp. They called it a Musterlager. It means as a sample lager camp for when the Red Cross came, to show them how nice it is and clean. And now they took us on trucks, and there was a gate where it said Arbeit macht frei. What it means, with work you will be liberated. They took us on trucks and brought us a few kilometers away, some 7 kilometers, was a camp, they called it Buna Monovit, where that camp was 10,000 prisoners, mostly Jewish. There were maybe 1,000 of non-Jews. And there we worked across the camp on the other side of the road was a factory operated by IG Farben, German company. And there we were mostly occupied by construction. And I worked as an electrician. Every day in the morning, the roll call, in the dark, in winter and snow, didn't make any difference. They took me out in the beginning to a commando, working commando, concrete pipes, big concrete pipes where we had to roll it there from a train. And I rolled over my foot that concrete pipe where I squashed my big toe. It cracked, it was frozen, it cracked like a nut. I just put some rags around it and it healed. Later
You wouldn't dare say anything to anybody about it.
yeah, I went there was an ambulatory like hospital, you could go there, but I got some pieces of rags where I could. Now, every day in the morning, get up, roll call. Everybody was running to his working commando, numbers, and we were marched out across the street where they made a corridor for us. And the whole factory, the whole plant, the IG Farben plant, was fenced around with towers where the guards went up on the towers before we went into the plant to watch us. After we came back from work, again roll call, and we could hear they call the guards down from the towers. Now there worked also Poles in that factory. It was 30,000, another 20,000 people working there. It was a chemical factory. They tried to extract some fuel for trucks and cars there from some, I don't know how they did it. Mostly we worked on construction, and I worked in electric commando. From time to time in a camp we had to witness hanging, because if they caught somebody with a civilian shirt under his uniform, or a pair of pants civilians, they accused him of trying to escape the camp, and they were hanged. Every time we came back from work, we had to witness hanging. There was one boy, before they hanged him, when he stood on a gallows, he said, "We are the last ones." "I am the last," he said, screamed out. They didn't like it. You start to scream, they just pulled that little trigger there where he just was coming down and hanging. And there were lots of people who got injured at work. Every time on a piece of wood they were carrying in injured men, where they were brought to that hospital. It was a regular barrack, just there was a doctor there. If he had broken something, a leg or something, he was finished. They took all the sick and sent back to Birkenau, where they were gassed and burned. One time we had wooden shoes. It was hard to walk. And when we went to work, it was snowing. It was hard to walk because the snow was sticking to the wooden soles. I took my shoes off. I hung them over my shoulder and walking barefoot in the snow. I didn't even get a cold. after that, I organized a pair of leather shoes. And what means organized, that was a saying, a camp saying, organizing. Everything from stealing to dealing to changing, we called to organize. I organized a pair of leather shoes. Half shoes, not whole shoes. One was a brown one and one was a black one. I couldn't mind. And one day after a rain, where my shoes were wet, soft, the soles were very thin, I stepped on a piece of wood with a rusty nail. And my foot started to swell. And I had the infection. Became green. I couldn't put any more my shoe on. And I went there in a camp when we came back to that ambulatory hospital, that barrack, and they accept me right away. There was a doctor, his name was Grossman. He was a prisoner like me, but that was his job in the hospital. He was a Dr. Grossman he was a German Jew from Berlin, and he told me he's gonna operate on me. What was the operation? Just to cut it out and hope it will heal. They didn't have much medication there, too much. And he put me on a table, not operating table, but it was a simpler table where I lie down. He put some mask on my face and some drops and told me to count. And he had some helpers, some orderly prisoners. That was their job there in that hospital. It was the same like all other barracks with banks. He cut out my foot, that piece, the size maybe of an inch by half an inch, and put something in there, I don't know what, put a piece of tape there. And I was there and after they finished, when I awaked, I could hear roll call. They were joking. They called roll call, stand up. And I had to step down with my one foot up and jump on one foot. They helped me a little bit to the bank there. And I was there for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, they said, the camp doctor is arriving. And the camp doctor, I didn't know what it is, the camp doctor, but I saw a high-ranking SS officer standing. And we had to come every of one forward to the front there, naked. And what I heard after the war, this was the famous Dr. Mengele. And when I came there in front of him, I tried to walk the best as I could. Dr. Grossman was standing behind him and explaining each sick what happened. And when I arrived, he said, "Diese Junge wird morgen entlassen." What it means, that youngster is already leaving tomorrow. And he let me through. I knew right away because they didn't write down my number. Whoever they wrote down his number, came a truck, took them away back to Birkenau. Well, that was the end of it. Next day I didn't want to be anymore there, even I couldn't walk. But Dr. Grossman gave me a slip that they have to keep me a couple of days in a barrack where we used to live, not to send me out to work. And I was there a couple of days. Later I went back out to work. One day when we had to shower, when we came back from work, we were running naked to the showers in summer. In winter, just we had such a coat, such a smoke, a thin one, where, with the stripes, where we were disusing, and the shoes, running to the showers. And our block eldest, his name was Rand, his family name was a German Jew, a man who saved lives. When I came in, past him at the door at the showers, he looked at me and he told me, "You are coming for a whole month after I divide the food, the soup in the evening. You come again and for a month and you will get another little bit soup." He wanted to help me because I was a skeleton. After a month, I went to him and thanked him for his good intentions, and he said, "You don't have to thank me. I am in the same boat like you, with you." After a few weeks, became a job, was a free job to take, to clean, bring back when they brought the soup to the blocks, to return the kettles from the soup, what was half barrels cut, half a barrel with ears, 2 ears. Whenever he finished it, he gave it to me. And we were 4 or 5 people, I don't remember exactly, a few people who were doing it. They called us the Kesselwäsche. We had to wash up these and return it to the kitchen. And sure, I had with my spoon, what I made myself, I could scratch the sides, the walls of that half a barrel and take out a little bit more food. And that was a saved my life for sure. Now, one day maybe in October of the same year, 1944, at work, there was a sound of an alarm, an air raid alarm. And everybody started to run, the Germans started to run, to hide. They had concrete bunkers, the Germans, where they were hiding. They didn't ask the prisoners, they didn't let in to hide. I just lay down on the ground with my face up, and I could see hair and see planes coming. After the planes arrived and they were diving, I noticed, and I noticed bombs in the air, what were very small like this, and coming down. As they come down, they became bigger. They were 250 kilogram bombs. And I could see buildings split in half. The cooling tower, they had a power station there, power works. And the cooling tower went up in flames. The whole soil started to shake, a foot up and a foot down with me. And I was splashed with soil coming on me because the bombs fell all around me, make big holes in the ground. Now we had to restore, they tried to restore that factory. They came a second wave, maybe another week later, the same thing. Christmas Day, it was the last time when they came again and bombed the whole to such a degree that it was not rebuildable anymore, not restorable. Then we didn't go out anymore to work. And while they bombed, they fell a bomb on one of our barracks and prisoners got killed. After Christmas, we didn't work anymore, but we didn't get even a little bit hot water, no hot soup, because the kitchen in the camp was operated by steam, and the steam came from the factory, from the power station. Now we were sitting like this, maybe a month, didn't work. And on January 1945.
What did you survive on for a month?
Pardon?
How could you survive for a month with no water?
No, they gave us some food, the bread we got. But we didn't get any hot drinks.
But you got water from somewhere.
Water we had, yeah. Now, I will go back a little bit in Buna, in Monowitz, where I was working once beside a fence. And I saw a horse and buggy with a German soldier with a buggy full with potatoes. I didn't say Herr Soldier, I said to him, Mr. Sergeant. I gave him a higher rank, what he probably liked. And I asked him to throw a few potatoes for me. He did it. Now was a problem how to eat the raw potatoes, where to cook them. But I found a way. There was the heating in our barracks there. And the radiators along one side of the barrack. And the excess of steam was coming out outside. I found a can where I put the potatoes in and hanged it over it, and somehow they were half raw, but I ate them anyway. Now on January 1945, I don't remember exactly the date. It was maybe around the 20th of January. A few days before, we could hear the big guns going. The front was 50 kilometers away from there. The Russians were close. And we had a hope. We hoped maybe the war is coming to an end. But it wasn't like this. They took us all out. Everybody had to take his blanket. They gave us a piece of bread, who everybody finished in a second. And they marched us out of the camp. We were marching for a day and a night and a day. They called it the night, is the name of that march. They marched us to Gleiwitz, what was maybe a couple of 100 kilometers away, Hungary.
How do you spell that? Gleiwitz?
Gleiwitz.
How do you spell
G-L-I-W-I-T-Z, Gleiwitz. Now they marched us there to Gleiwitz. On the road, whoever couldn't walk was taken aside and shot. It was snowing in January with wooden shoes. When we came every time closer, you could see more bodies on the side of the road. Whoever couldn't just walk that was the end. And I said, if I don't make it, if I don't walk, try my best, I am finished. We hooked up together with a few friends, and we were walking. I was really walking like a robot. My legs were going by themselves, like a robot. I closed my eyes, and sometimes I slept, walking. When we arrived at Gleiwitz in a camp, That was Gleiwitz number 2, was also a camp because Auschwitz all around had maybe 40 camps. When we arrived there, it was a small camp, and there was no room where to go in. Even in the washrooms, nowhere to go in. I found a board, a piece of wood, a board like a door. I put it on the snow had a friend who I worked together. We lied down, both of us, on that piece of wood. It was freezing. Covered ourselves with 2 blankets, said goodbye to each other because we were sure we weren't awake anymore. Now, I don't know how long we slept, but when I awaked in the morning, daylight, we were not alive. After being there a day, food, nothing, absolutely nothing, they start to load us on trains. They put me on a train in open coal cars, and so tight, maybe 140 people, where there was no room, I don't say to lie down, but even to sit down was no room. And the train started to roll. After a few days, everybody was already tired and fell asleep. I fell asleep and I fell down, and somebody was lying on me, and the third one and the fourth one, and I felt I'm choking. Somehow, by the help of a friend, he helped me to get up. I stood up, grabbed a little bit snow from the air when it was snowing on my tongue, or from my shoulder, a little bit snow on my mouth. That was the whole thing. We traveled and traveled for 10 days. After a few days, no food whatsoever. No washroom facilities, nothing. You did it wherever you stood, if you had what to do. After a few days, the last few days, we had lots of room. 3/4 of the people didn't survive in that train. with the Poles to Germany. They took them and they destroyed all the buildings. They took them to Germany in camps. She worked she was in Oranienburg and Sachsenhausen. Also, there were famous German concentration camps where she had to work. But she wasn't as Jewish, she was as a Pole. After the liberation, when she was liberated somewhere in northern Germany, she used to come to Hamburg. There was the Red Cross. She had a brother in Paris before the war who was studying in Paris. And she wanted to get in touch, find him. So she used to come to Hamburg every time. Now, we were running around all the towns after the war, going here, going there, and we were in Hamburg. And once we met her, she came to us. She has a language, we were speaking Yiddish. It's a language what sounds something to her. She tried to forget. She knew Yiddish before the war. But she tried to not to mention, not to speak, because sometimes in sleep she could say a Jewish word. So she tried to forget. And she sees Jewish boys. And we told her there is a camp, Bergen-Belsen, where there lots of Jews survived. We didn't know about other ones. And so she said she wants to, we told her, you come with us. But she said, no, I have to go back to the camp, because if there comes a letter for me from my brother, I have to tell them there. So she went back to there. And she had two sisters were her girlfriends. And she told them that she's going among Jews because she's Jewish. So one of them fainted. Said it's not impossible. And so next day we were there, and she came and we took her to Hanover, and later she was my girlfriend, and we got later married. Now when I came to Canada in 1965, my son got married in 1974, I think so. And my daughter got a few years later married. And I have 7 grandchildren.
3 from your son? And
my son has 3 and my daughter has 4.
and you've had your own company?
Now, where, in Tel Aviv?
In Toronto?
Toronto, yes. In Toronto, when I came, I went first to work because I couldn't speak English. I went a year, I worked, and the same time I organized my own shop already, where I officially registered it in the beginning of 1967 with the name Start Auto Electric, was the same name I had in Tel Aviv.
What language do you speak to your kids in?
My kids, I'm speaking Hebrew, and to my grandchildren also Hebrew. Because this is the language I start to speak to them.
Do your kids know Yiddish?
They go to Bialik, so they learned a little bit Yiddish. They know some Yiddish songs. My son, yes. My son, my daughter are speaking Yiddish, even Polish. Because I used to speak Polish with my wife, because that was the only language when I met her she knew. So I continued to speak to her in Polish. And my son learned, and my daughter, from just listening to us. And when they went to school, in Tel Aviv in 1967. They came, it was the Polish immigration to Israel in the time from President Gomulka, where he let the Jews out from Poland. So my son, I remember, used to be a translator from Polish to Hebrew, Hebrew-Polish in a school, because the the children didn't know any Hebrew.
Mr. Melnick, I wanted to ask you, what kept you going during the war? There were times in the camps you told me you were starving, you were sick, you were hurt. How did you not give up? How did you not sometimes throw yourself at a soldier just so that you would be shot?
There is a hope, you know, when as long, that's the nature, as long you have your eyes open, you hope. And second, you couldn't be any smart, nothing. It's just purely marked up there and luck. Now, I am a little bit occupied with speaking about the Holocaust to children, school children. And I want to thank my wife Elaine for supporting me.
You got remarried.
I got remarried
Bella died in
1987, and I got married 4 years ago.
In 1991.
I think so, yeah, 91. February 91, yeah. Now I want to thank her for supporting me and encouraging me to do it. I feel it as to do it as a holy cause for it, to teach children what it was, to know them, that, and I'm telling them, that they're here from a first source, from a survivor, so they can tell their children, and to learn that it wouldn't happen anymore, what happened to me, to my parents, to my relatives, so their children can be safe.
Did you always talk to your children about it when they were growing up?
I never spoke to my children. I just started in the later years, when they start to learn in school about the Holocaust. I was speaking with them, but in the years after the war, we didn't talk. We just wanted to forget about it.
You talk to your grandchildren about it?
Not much. I have one of my grandchildren, a girl, Shira. Before we went to Poland, she heard something we are going, and she learned about the Holocaust. She asked me how was it there. So I told her. She heard about some showers. She said, good showers and bad showers. And you probably, grandpa, must have been in a good shower. So I told her about that transport to Dora Mittelbau, about the 10 days without food. And she asked me, Grandpa, didn't you could buy something to eat? How could I explain it to her? So she looked at me again and asked, didn't you have money? And how could I tell her? I told her, when I come back, I will talk with you.
So you were telling me that you always had hope. Were there never moments that you wished it would end?
I am sure every one of us, everyone who didn't survive, had the same hope like me.
Were there ever moments that you felt you couldn't go on living?
No.
You always
Always,
wanted to
yeah.
live, and you always knew you would.
Always, yeah. But I am sure all other ones had the same hope like me. They're just pure luck.
Do you You mentioned before you pointed upwards, so I take it you still believe in Hashem.
I didn't change. The way I was, I am.
So you did believe before the war,
Sure.
and you still
There
do?
was everybody believing. All the Jews, mostly of them.
Did you ever try to talk to Hashem during the war, when you were in the camps?
No.
Did you think of Hashem?
We didn't have time to think about it. There were religious people. There were even some could put on tefillin in Auschwitz. There were whoever wanted to do it.
When it came time to the Jewish holidays, like Rosh Hashanah and so on, Sukkot, were you aware?
We didn't. We knew we didn't eat our food on Yom Kippur. Whoever took it just kept it, the piece of bread, until the evening.
Even though you were starving?
Yeah.
That's
Not to
pretty
eat a
strong.
couple of days was nothing for us. Not all of them, but some of them. And you know, in an emergency like this, sakanat nefesh, you can do anything. You can eat even on Yom Kippur.
So what do you say to people when they sometimes they comment, where was Hashem during the war? How could
I
we believe
have
Hashem?
my answer for it.
What's your answer?
My answer is I had lots of friends, who were very religious before the war. And after the war, they just dropped their religion. They didn't want to hear about it. On the other hand, I have friends opposite, who were not religious before the war, and they became even Orthodox after the war. And me, myself, I remain the same. I have no answer to it. I cannot answer where was God.
So your answer is you don't have an answer.
I don't have.
It's up to the individual.
Yes.
But you always believe.
Yeah.
Just before we get to your pictures, is there anything that you would like to say to your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren? Everybody's going to be here.
Yes, I would like everybody of them to be involved in it,
In what?
in speaking, be active, to tell my grandchildren, to tell their children, and to be active, because after a few years there won't be any survivors, so somebody has to continue it.
What should the world learn from your experiences?
The world has to learn to be aware and not to let happen something like this again. I don't think it will happen in the near future, but you never know what can happen. Something like this can happen in 10 generations, in that dimension, in these dimensions what it was.
Okay, Mr. Melnick, I want to thank you very much. And
Thank you.
What we'll do now is we will get to the photographs, and you can tell us things of your grandchildren and so on.
I will. Thank you. That picture is of my father, Elijah, beside him, my brother, Joseph, and me, and my sister, Genya. This was taken in Lodz in the beginning of the 30s in Sienkiewicz Park. This is a picture of my sister Genya, who died at the age of 9 and is buried in Lodz on a cemetery. I was there 2 years ago. I had the number of the plot and we couldn't find the grave. This is the, these are the medals of independence and Sinai campaign of the Israeli army.
Which is which?
The first one on the right, on the left is the independence, for the independence war.
That's the dark blue.
And the dark blue one, and with the yellow one, what marks the desert is the Sinai campaign. This is a picture of my family taken some 10 years ago. From the left to the right on top is my daughter Betty, who was born in June 16, 1953. Beside her is her son Alon, who was born on the 30th of September 1978. Beside him in the center is my son-in-law Yohanan, who was born on December the 24th, the year was 1948. Beside him is my son Elijah Eli, who was born September the 17th, 1948. Now, from the left to the right again is standing is Limor, who was born on February the 6th, 1977.
Who's a she?
My granddaughter.
Yeah, but your daughters?
My daughter's, my Betty's daughter. Now, beside her and in between me and Limor is Adi, who is my daughter's son, my grandson, born on the 15th of June, 1982. Beside me in the center is my wife Hela. Beside her is my daughter-in-law Rivka, who was born the 8th of August, Rivka, March the 7th, 1949. Now on her lap, in front, in a red dress, in a red outfit, is Shira, who was born on January the 22nd, 1948. She is my 84, is my daughter's Betty's daughter, my granddaughter. Beside her on the lap of Rivka is Adam. He is the youngest of the family. He was born on June the 11th, 1984. Now, beside Rivka is Micha.
In the red.
In the red was Micha, who was born in May the 2nd, 1977. And beside him in a blue sweater is Doron, who was born on September the 21st, 1974.
Was there an occasion for this picture?
No, it was just a family picture to make. This is a picture taken in the time of the bar mitzvah of my grandson Alon, who is my daughter's son. That's me, my daughter Betty, and my son Eli.
So what year was this taken?
This was taken in
91.
In 1991, yes. This is a picture taken at the bar mitzvah of my grandson Alon. On the right side is my wife Elaine beside me, and the rest is all my children and my son-in-law, daughter-in-law and all the grandchildren.
1995? You were saying you had lots of room.
We had lots of room. There were so many dead people. We could sit on them. There were warm bodies. We could lie on them. On some stations we threw the bodies out and they were put on the last cars. After 10 days, we were all remaining people, whoever survived, were sick. We had high temperature. We weren't anymore hungry. We were thirsty. And when we arrived in a place, what they called Dora Mittelbau in Germany, after 10 days, we couldn't walk. And I jumped out from the car. First, I fell to the ground and grabbing some snow in my mouth. We were thirsty. Now the camp was on a hill. The factory was underground in a mountain. They built the V rockets, the V1 and V2 was built there. The camp was on the side of the hill. And I couldn't walk. I walked on all four, on my hands and feet. When I came up there, again they took us in a shower, changed our clothing, changed our numbers. We got the numbers from Buchenwald, numbers.
Do you remember your number?
I don't remember. If I would remember, I would say it, because I had it for a short while. The other, my number, Auschwitz number, I can't forget because I see it every time. Now, again, they let us rest a couple of days. In a big hall was there. And they divide us into the blocks again, the barracks where we used to live there. Divide us in working groups. And I got a job as an electrician. I used to do service. I had a helper, Moshe Braunfeld, my friend. He was helping me. We didn't get too much food there, nothing almost. A little bit soup, watery soup. In the beginning we received a piece of bread, but not later anymore. Got a couple of potatoes in a peel, the size like walnuts. And when you had luck, you were lucky they were rotten, but they ate it anyway. At work, we worked underground. We didn't see daylight. There were 2 shifts working. To that camp went 60,000 prisoners. We were the first Jews there. There were Poles, and I remember them, some faces from Auschwitz, from Buna Monowitz. I remember when we arrived a few months later, they were taken away and sent there. And whoever arrived there in the beginning when they built that factory didn't survive, because they had to work with press hammers, air press hammers, to dig these tunnels. It was in a mountain where it was impossible to destroy. They transferred that factory from Peenemünde in Germany, where was bombed, that place, and the remain of it, whatever they could salvage, they brought it there a year later. I had 2 foremen, one in a night shift and one in a day shift. Now, they became a little friendlier with me. One asked me, "Why are you in prison?" He was a civilian. And I just answered right away, because I'm Jewish. Then he asked my friend Moshe Braunfeld, he asked him, and he got the same answer. So he became a little bit nicer to us, brought a piece of bread where he didn't give it to me in my hand, because the factory police was, the securities are running around. He just put it somewhere and told me, there and there on that and that machine I put it, and go get it. Wasn't a big piece of bread, very thin, a slice, but it helped. Now, every time when we came from work, there were hangings. They were hanging people on a roll call square. They hanged Russians. I don't know why. They said they made sabotage. In a tunnel where we used to work, there were 2 big tunnels, and cut across tunnels, there were the holes where the factory was. I was doing service, means I wasn't all around the whole factory, walking around to fix a lathe, to fix change a motor or switch, whatever, to restore. And the foreman used to tell me, Germany is finished. I would just listen with one ear, and the other ear went out. I didn't answer, I didn't react, because you couldn't say anything and shouldn't say anything. You never knew what his intentions are. This I learned, to listen everything, but not to talk. One day, my friend Moshe Braunfeld, he had 2 German marks. In Auschwitz, in Bunamonowitz, he could deal a little, we could deal a little bit, organize a little bit, to sell a pair of underwear or an undershirt and buy a piece of bread. But here we couldn't do anything. There were no civilians, just our foremen. They were all the Mainsters or prisoners. That's it. The whole factory maybe was 50 civilians. And we were thousands working there. He smuggled in the 2 marks from Auschwitz, from Bunamonowitz, 2 German marks. What's not a big thing. Now he told him, the Meister became friendlier with us, the foreman. He told him, I found 2 German 2 marks, maybe you can buy half a bread for me. And he said, what? You found 2 marks or somebody lost it? And he went to the administration in the front of the camp there, the SS. After a few minutes, they called him and they beat him up. And they start to ask each other, what shall we do with him? He was beaten up, I had his face. I remember I stood, it was exactly roll call, and they were hanging the Russians. So he said one to each other, you know what, we are hanging the Russians, put him there next. And Moshe Braunfeld, I can see coming out from the administration barrack on a roll call square. They lead him to the gallows, and he stays beside the gallows, standing and waiting for his turn to be hanged. The Russian, boom, they pulled the triggers, the Russian hanging, maybe six of them. All of a sudden, sound an air raid alarm. And they told us, and there were loudspeakers there around, they told us to disperse and hide. And Moshe Braunfeld ran away, and they forgot about him. He is alive, lives in Brooklyn, has his family with grandchildren, and I met him a couple of times. Now, every time we heard more airplanes coming, we could hear them. On beginning of April, I don't know exactly what day it was, but I heard from other prisoners, they told me it's the first day of Passover. On a roll call, they said, Jews separate. I didn't answer. I went where all other ones went. We didn't have marks, we are Jews or not Jews, we had just our numbers there. In Auschwitz with the mark that we are Jews. They give us each one, ironically, the first day of Passover, a whole bread where we are not supposed to eat bread. They gave us a bread where we finished it right away, the whole bread. A little bread, army bread, a square one, they called it. I don't know how. Anyway, they put us on trains again. And they took a few days. We passed railroad station with burning trains on other tracks standing. Took maybe 5 days all around and around. The Americans were not far away. That's what they took us out. It was 1945. They brought us again to a place, Bergen-Belsen. It's in North Germany, below Lüneburg, north of Celle. This was a camp. When we arrived again, we had to walk from the railroad to the camp. They didn't put us in that camp, Belsen, because there were thousands of dead people, an epidemic of typhoid. They put us 1 kilometer away from that camp. It was a camp, a SS camp, where it was empty. There were guards around the whole camp, Hungarian soldiers. They were guarding us. And whoever couldn't walk again got shot on the side of the road. We arrived there. We didn't get nothing, no food, no nothing. We were there for a week. But when I arrived there, there were some German military canteen for the soldiers, and I noticed some boys are running down a basement. Sure, I didn't wait long, I ran down too. And when I came down, we stood on potatoes under us. But we were so tight, one to the other, pushed together, that nobody could bend down and pick up potatoes. And then was so full, I went down, was skinny, grabbed a few potatoes in my shirt, I put them in my shirt. Now how to get out? You couldn't back up, you were so full. Full, the steps, couldn't. And the SS was shooting over our heads. I noticed a little window on the top of the wall below the ceiling. And I became Superman. I just flew out to it. I don't know how. Probably by the help of some others. Now you imagine the few potatoes, how many friends I had. I didn't eat it myself. And this helped me to survive, otherwise I wouldn't. One of my friends found a can, found a rusty nail and a stone, and punched it, made like a, how you call it, pumpia.
Flint.
Yeah, and to scratch these potatoes on it.
Oh, like a grater.
Yeah,
Grater.
to grate it, yeah, with the skin. And another empty can from the garbage somewhere, found it. And we made a little fire and boiling it in water, and that's what we ate. We ate, everybody had his spoon, one spoon, and it went around and around. Now, after a week, we heard some noise. Like, we didn't know what. But one who was sitting on a window, we didn't have where to sleep there. One guy was sleeping on a table, I was sleeping on the floor without nothing. He said, something is going on. And I jumped up and looked through the window. I saw tanks, a column of tanks going by the fence of the camp with white stars. I understood what it is, and we started to run to the fence. But the guards didn't let us go to the fence. They chased us away. The column passed on a road. Again quiet, we are still prisoners. The same thing, no change. Next morning, there came in some SS officers, maybe 10 of them or 12. Roll call again, counting us, but we saw they have white armbands on their arms. What then, a little bit, a spark of hope came through our minds. We knew what it is, white, surrender. And one of them told us that the British are here and they are going to transfer us, give us over to them. They thought to save their skin with that. We didn't believe them, but we just couldn't believe that it's happening. But there's that little spark in our minds, and the same time we noticed a few jeeps coming in on a roll call square with, again, armbands. They had written MP on it. This was the British military police. They went to them, took their guns away, put them on jeeps and drove them out the camp. Then we knew we are free. But we didn't really react with such a happiness. We couldn't think properly what it means to be free. It took us a long time. First, we didn't get any food for another 2 weeks. Very, very little. They gave us some pork schmaltz, pork fat, where everybody got sick after it. And they had milk powder, they cooked milk. Now imagine pork fat with milk powder, with milk. So everybody was running. And the washroom was impossible to go in already. So now they arrived, the command car, with a British officer. He stood up on the roof and made a prayer that we are the first Jews he met. And he told us to be happy, because not far away from here is a camp where there are thousands of bodies lying around. So some of them were screaming, "They are dead, but we are alive, so bring something to eat." It took 2 weeks until we got something to eat. After 2 weeks, they put us, disinfect us, with some spray, I think was DDT. The British took us out of that camp, dispersed us in all other towns there, in Celle, in some ex-army, German army camps. And that camp became a hospital for the remaining people from the original camp Bergen-Belsen, who was burned down to the ground after they took the people out. There are mass graves there, 5,000, 8,000, 10,000. I remember before they took us out, they brought the Germans, the SS, to carry the bodies. In the old camp they used bulldozers, the British, but some people didn't like it, but we couldn't do it. We were weak and sick. After that, they brought me to Celle, and from Celle, we went to Hanover, where I arranged for myself with my friend. We used to live at a German family. We had a room. We were supported from the UNRWA. We were supported from the Joint. And we were supported from the Jewish Relief from London. After being there in Germany for 2.5 years, or less, now in 1945, in summer 45, I met a girl, also a survivor, who became my wife. We got married in February of 1946 in Hanover. Now in 1948, in February, we went to Palestine, where after a short time, they kept first in a little hotel for a week, 2 weeks, and later we had to look for ourselves. I became no more refugee. I had to go on my own. I found a little shed where I rented, and I used to live there with my wife. Later I went to the army, and I went to the 7th Brigade. I was in the 7th Brigade. It was before the state was created. Really, it was the Haganah, but later it became the 7th Brigade. I participated in the road to Jerusalem, to open the road. I fought in Galilee. I participated in building that Burma road to Jerusalem, where we bypassed Latun. After I left the army in 1949, I had a few dollars, a few pounds, really Israeli pounds, or Palestine money still. And I started to organize the workshop for myself. I went on my own. And I had a shop under the same name, like I have it here. I continued here. And now my children were born in Israel.
What are your children's names?
My son's name is Elijah Eli.
When was he born?
He was born the 17th of September 1948. My daughter's name is Betty. She was born in June the 16th, 1953. And we came in 1965 to Canada. My wife had a cousin that was the only surviving relative or cousin. What he sponsored us.
What was your wife's name?
Hela.
And her last name?
Sosnovich was her name from home.
How do you spell that?
Sosnowicz. Now coming.
You wanted to tell me a little bit about your
wife
and her experience.
Okay. My wife was. My wife was also a survivor. She survived the ghetto Warsaw until April. She was until before Passover of 1943. She was in a ghetto. But before the ghetto before the uprising, her brother, who was also participating in the uprising, he arranged for her to get out from the ghetto to a Christian family where they helped her to survive. She didn't live with them. They just arranged for her first papers, a birth certificate they bought from a church somewhere. And with that certificate, she went to the administration for a passport. I mean, not passport, but the identification card, where they, with her picture. Now she had to hide there. She used to live as a Christian, and she used to live with some Christian families where they didn't know she's Jewish. And one time, a few times, somebody recognized her, and they were running behind her, knocking on the door. A Jew is here hiding somewhere. But she was lucky that women where she lived with her wasn't home. So she went in and closed the door and didn't answer. And then they disappeared. If she would be there, she would be finished.
May 9, 1995. So you were telling me about your wife,
Yes.
Hela.
She was on false papers in Warsaw, and after when the uprising of 1944, the Poles made uprising, the Armia Krajowa, or they call it the National Army, when the Russians were on the other side in Warsaw, on the other side of the river, they made uprising against the Germans, where they didn't succeed, and the Germans depressed that uprising. They took out all Poles, whole sections of Warsaw, and my wife, Hela, went